The moon hung low over the sprawling ranch, its pale light spilling across the fields like liquid silver. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the faint scent of hay and earth, and the distant lowing of cattle echoed softly in the night. Cole Whitman wiped sweat from his brow despite the chill, his boots crunching on the dry dirt as he made his way toward the barn. He had finished his rounds hours ago, but something had drawn him back outside, an unease he couldn't shake. He paused at the edge of the pasture, squinting into the shadows. Something moved near the barn, slow, deliberate, but not quite like the gait of his horses. He froze, every muscle taut. The darkness was thick, swallowing shapes whole, but then a glint of moonlight caught on something in the figure's hands. "Hey," Cole called, his voice firm but not harsh. "Who's there?" The figure stiffened, and he could see her then, a woman, dark-haired and trembling, her coat pulled tight around her. She didn't run. Instead, she stood rooted to the spot, clutching something close to her chest. The outline was small, fragile, and she held it as if the world might snatch it away in an instant. Don't pull it away." Her voice was a whisper, barely audible, yet it cut through the night like a blade. She took a small step back, her eyes wide, and Cole realized she was terrified. "But of what? And why? What is it you're holding?" he asked gently, trying not to startle her. She shook her head, pressing the bundle closer to her body. "You have to help me," she said, her words quivering. "Please, you have to help me." Cole's instincts kicked in. He had been on the ranch all his life, seen men and animals injured, storms tear through barns, and still, something about the way she trembled, the desperation in her eyes, rooted him to the spot. It was raw, urgent, demanding attention, and a strange protective surge welled up inside him. He stepped closer, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Okay, I'll help," he said. His voice was calm, but his heart thumped in his chest like a warning drum. The woman flinched at his approach but didn't retreat. Instead, she let out a shaky breath and whispered again, Don't pull it away." Cole knelt cautiously, lowering himself to her level. The bundle in her arms shifted slightly, and he caught a glimpse of something small, fragile, an animal, his gut telling him it was hurt. The sight made a sharp pang of fear spike through him. He had seen injured wildlife before, but never anything that had someone holding it with such trembling care, eyes wide with a mix of hope and panic. His hands hovered near hers, careful not to make sudden movements. "I won't hurt it," he promised, almost as if saying it aloud would keep it safe. The woman's grip on the bundle tightened, then relaxed fractionally, enough for him to feel her trust. Time slowed. The night was still around them, the fields silent except for the whispering wind. Cole realized that every second he hesitated could mean the difference between life and death, for the creature, for the woman, maybe even for him. Something primal, urgent, protective, flared inside him. He had no plan, no manual for this moment, only the certainty that he had to act, and act carefully. Cole's hands hovered just above the tiny creature, his breath catching as he finally saw what she was holding. It was a fawn, no more than a few days old, its leg bent at an unnatural angle and its chest rising and falling in shallow, fragile breaths. The sight made his stomach tighten. He had dealt with injured livestock before, horses, calves, even the occasional wild animal, but this was different. There was a vulnerability here that cut through him, and the raw fear in the woman's eyes reflected back at him like a mirror. Don't pull it away," she repeated, her voice barely more than a quiver. She pressed the fawn closer, as if her own body could shield it from the world. "It's the only chance it has. You have to help it. But gently, please." Cole froze, every instinct screaming in conflicting directions. The fawn's tiny legs twitched, and its ears flicked in a way that made his heart clench. He had the skill to tend to livestock, to restrain, to stabilize, but this delicate, fragile life demanded a tenderness he hadn't used in years. One wrong move could end it. His mind raced, but time seemed to stretch thin, each second amplified in the still night. The woman's hands shook as she guided his, her fear tangible, yet she trusted him enough to let him near. That trust, fragile and fleeting, grounded him in a way he hadn't expected. "Okay," he said finally, his voice low and steady, though his pulse thundered in his ears. "I can help it. I just need to move slowly, all right?" She nodded, a shuddering exhale escaping her lips. Slow and careful. Cole leaned closer, his knees pressing into the cold dirt as he adjusted his grip around the fawn. The softness of its fur against his palms, the warmth of its tiny body, and the shallow, uneven rhythm of its breathing all struck him like a blow. He had never felt something so fragile, so alive, demand his full attention. For a moment, he couldn't move. His hands were poised, and he just stared, frozen in shock, not just at the fawn's vulnerability, but at the intensity of the connection between them. He felt a surge of protective instinct, raw and urgent, that made every rational thought disappear. It was as if the world had narrowed to this single, fragile life, and the woman holding it, and nothing else existed. Finally, forcing himself to breathe, he acted. He let his hands cradle the fawn gently, letting its weight rest in his palms as he adjusted its position without jerking or twisting. The woman guided him softly, her trembling hands brushing his, and for a heartbeat, everything else, the ranch, the wind, the moonlit night, faded into nothing. Cole realized then that hesitation could kill the fawn. And in that realization, something inside him snapped into action. Fear became focus. Shock became determination. He would not let this life slip away while he stood frozen. The fawn's breathing steadied slightly as he held it closer, and the woman's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "It's okay," Cole whispered, mostly to himself, mostly to the tiny creature. "I've got it. We've got it." In that moment, under the moonlight, Cole understood something vital. Life, fragile and fleeting, demanded courage, and sometimes, that courage meant acting before fear could paralyze you. Cole acted with deliberate urgency, each movement measured but filled with an almost reckless intensity. He lifted the fawn carefully, feeling its tiny body tremble in his hands. The woman's hands hovered near his, unsure at first, then gradually guiding him, trembling slightly against his own. Every breath he took seemed too loud in the still night, every rustle of the grass amplified as if the world itself held its breath. It's okay," he murmured, more to himself than to the fawn, though his voice carried a strange reassurance. The creature twitched, weakly pressing its head into his palms, and Cole's chest tightened. He had never felt a bond like this, raw, urgent, and immediate. The woman's eyes met his, white and shining in the moonlight. "Be careful, please," she whispered, but there was something more there too, an intensity that made Cole's pulse skip. Her hands brushed his again as she guided him, and for the briefest moment, the world contracted. Until it consisted only of three fragile beings under a silver sky, him, her, and the fawn struggling for life between them. His focus sharpened, every sense on edge. He adjusted the fawn's position, supporting its broken leg with a gentleness that surprised him. Each movement required a delicate balance of strength and tenderness. One slip, one sudden jerk, and everything could shatter. Cole felt the pressure of responsibility as if it had landed physically on his shoulders, yet beneath that weight burned an undeniable, desperate energy. He could not fail, not this time. The woman's hands trembled as they lingered on his wrists, guiding him, helping him steady the fragile body. Cole caught the subtle electricity between them, the shared intensity of fear and hope, and it mingled with the raw adrenaline surging through his veins. He could feel the heat of her presence, close enough to brush against him, and in that moment, all the caution he had carried melted into instinctive, passionate focus. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was only a few tortuous minutes, the fawn's breathing began to even out. Its tiny chest rose and fell with a rhythm that seemed slightly stronger, slightly steadier. Cole let out a shaky breath, the tension of the moment coursing through him like electricity. The woman's hands lingered on his arms, her gaze locked with his, and for a heartbeat, the world outside the barn, the moonlit fields, even the fear of failing the fawn, all of it disappeared. "You saved it," she whispered, voice trembling, emotion raw and unfiltered. "I couldn't, not," Cole replied, his own voice rough with exhaustion and something deeper, harder to name. His hands still cradled the fawn, but he felt the heat of her presence like a tether, grounding him. In the midst of fear and urgency, a connection had been forged, charged with a desperate, almost reckless passion. Cole's chest heaved, adrenaline mingling with something else entirely, a stirring awareness that life, fragile and fleeting, could ignite emotion in the most unexpected ways. He realized that the desperation, the fear, the tenderness, they had created something unspoken, something electric, and it hovered between them in the quiet of the night. The fawn shifted slightly, pressing into his hands, and Cole looked up to see her watching him. There was gratitude, yes, but also something more, a spark of trust, of reliance, of shared intensity that neither of them could deny. And in that moment, under the silver glow of the moon and the whispering wind, Cole understood that the desperate passion that had fueled his actions was more than just survival. It was a bridge between two people, sudden and fierce, who had been drawn together by the fragility of life. Cole and the woman moved carefully toward the barn, the fawn cradled between them like a fragile promise. Every step was deliberate, the soft dirt underfoot threatened to betray their balance, and even the whispering wind seemed to hold its breath. Once inside, the warmth of the barn wrapped around them, contrasting with the chill of the night outside. Hay rustled softly under their feet, and the familiar scent of the ranch mingled with the sharp tang of adrenaline that still clung to Cole. They set the fawn down on a makeshift bed of blankets and straw. Cole adjusted the cloth, tucking it gently around the tiny body, his fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. The woman watched him, her hands still trembling slightly, her dark eyes reflecting relief, awe, and something deeper, something unspoken. She's going to be okay, isn't she? She asked, voice barely audible, laden with worry that hadn't fully left her. Cole shook his head slowly, trying to steady both the animal and himself. Yeah, she'll be okay, he said, his voice rough from exhaustion. But we have to keep her calm and warm. She's fragile, but she's a fighter. Just like, he hesitated, glanced at her, and then looked away, unsure whether to say more, just like some people I've seen tonight. A faint, almost shy smile tugged at her lips, and she glanced down at the fawn. Thank you, she said softly, the words carrying more than gratitude. I didn't think anyone would come, let alone stay. Cole ran a hand through his hair, still trying to release the tension coiled in his chest. I couldn't just stand there. Not with something this small, this helpless. Someone has to act. He paused, and his gaze met hers, lingering a beat longer than strictly necessary. Sometimes, doing what's right means moving before you even think. For a long moment, silence hung in the barn. The fawn stirred slightly, then settled again, and the woman's eyes held his, reflecting relief, lingering fear, and something more, an acknowledgement of the bond they had formed under impossible circumstances. Cole felt it too, that unspoken connection, charged with adrenaline and the intensity of having faced something fragile together. She shifted closer, hesitant but deliberate, and for a heartbeat, the distance between them felt irrelevant. I don't even know your name, she whispered, and Cole realized that the ordinary act of introducing themselves felt trivial compared to what had just transpired. Cole, he said simply. Cole Whitman. I'm Mara, she replied, her voice soft but steady. Mara Lorne. They exchanged no more words, but a quiet understanding settled between them, deeper than conversation could reach. The fawn was safe, and yet, somehow, that safety had created something fragile and alive between them as well. Something born from fear, from desperation, from care, the kind of connection that doesn't demand explanation, only acknowledgement. Outside, the wind rustled through the fields, carrying away the echoes of the night's terror. Inside, the barn was warm, filled with the subtle sounds of breathing, human and animal alike, and a sense of shared triumph, however fragile. Cole felt the weight of what had passed slowly ease from his shoulders, replaced by a soft awareness that life, in all its fragility, had a way of drawing people together in the most unexpected ways. Mara's eyes lingered on him, and he returned the gaze, the unspoken acknowledgement that tonight had changed something in both of them. They had acted together, lived through fear together, and in doing so had forged a bond neither could forget. The fawn, delicate and trembling, lay nestled safely in the straw, and in that quiet barn, two strangers discovered the unexpected warmth of human connection, born from desperation, courage, and the unyielding force of care. Cole leaned against the barn wall, exhaling slowly, and Mara reached out, letting her fingers brush his arm. The contact was brief, subtle, but electric, a silent promise that neither the night nor the fragility of life could ever fully erase. They had saved a life tonight, but in the process, they had also discovered something quietly, fiercely alive between them. The first light of dawn filtered through the cracks in the barn walls, painting everything in a soft, golden haze. The night's adrenaline had ebbed, leaving behind a quiet exhaustion that pressed into Cole's muscles and weighed on his eyelids. He shifted carefully on the hay-strewn floor, glancing at the fawn. Its breathing was steadier now, its little chest rising and falling with a rhythm that promised survival. Mara sat beside him, wrapped in a heavy blanket that smelled faintly of her coat and the earth outside. She traced her fingers absently along the straw. avoiding looking directly at him, though he could feel her gaze lingering. The night had passed, but the intensity of what they'd shared lingered, unspoken and unshakable. "You know," she said softly, breaking the silence, "I never expected anyone to actually care. Most people just look the other way when something's small and helpless." Cole chuckled lightly, though it was more a rasp than a sound. "Yeah, most people probably wouldn't. But I guess, some things are worth acting on." His eyes met hers briefly, and he felt that same electric pull from the night before, tempered now with something gentler but no less urgent. The fawn stirred, lifting its head slightly. Mara leaned forward, her hands hovering above it as if afraid any sudden motion might undo what they'd done. "She's stronger than I thought," she whispered, almost to herself. "Just, so small, but strong." Cole nodded, his own hands resting lightly near the fawn. "Yeah, she's a fighter. She had to be, to survive out there alone." He hesitated, then added quietly, "Kind of like you." Mara's head snapped up, eyes wide, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then she laughed softly, a sound fragile but full of warmth. "Maybe. But it took you to help her survive. And me too, I guess." Cole's chest tightened at her words, and he realized the truth he hadn't allowed himself to admit before. That night, in the moonlight, the desperation, the fear, and the care they'd poured into the fawn had created something more between them, a bond that neither adrenaline nor exhaustion could erase. He leaned back against the wall, studying her profile as she carefully brushed stray strands of hair from her face. The morning light illuminated her features in a way that made him catch his breath, and he found himself smiling faintly despite the weariness in his body. "You know," he said softly, "I don't usually get visitors at this hour. Least of all ones carrying a fawn on the edge of death." Mara smiled, a hint of mischief breaking through her exhaustion. "Well, maybe you need more exciting nights." The tension between them softened, but the intensity remained, a quiet pulse beneath their words. They worked together to check the fawn, adjusting the blankets, whispering gentle reassurances. Every movement carried a familiarity now, a rhythm formed from shared responsibility and trust. Hours passed like this, quiet and slow, until the sun had risen fully and the barn was bathed in golden light. Cole and Mara stepped outside for the first time since the night before, the ranch stretching endlessly under the morning sky. The wind carried the scent of wild grass and dew, a reminder that life went on, fragile and beautiful. Mara took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the horizon. "We saved her," she said finally, voice steady. "And, we saved ourselves too, in a way." Cole's gaze softened. "Yeah, guess we did." For a long moment, they stood side by side, the fawn safely nestled in the barn behind them, and the weight of the previous night finally began to lift. The world was calm now, but the bond forged under desperation, fear, and care remained, a quiet promise that neither distance nor time could erase. And as the sun climbed higher, spilling warmth across the ranch, Cole realized something he hadn't admitted before, that some connections, born from the most intense and vulnerable moments, were impossible to forget. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something fragile and exhilarating stir in his chest, a hope that life, in all its unpredictability, might just give him a second chance at something he hadn't even known he was missing.